Welcome to the first podcast in my review of the books that I read in 2025. Let's get going. Ready for my close-up for the making of Sunset Boulevard and the Dark Side of the Hollywood Dream by David M. Lubin. This book was originally published in August the 12th, 2025. And I got it pretty much as soon as it came out, as soon as I could. And I read it in November. I've always been a fan of this particular film. Sunset Boulevard is just an incredible film. It's stylish. It's beautifully made. It's beautifully acted. The casting is just spot on. The script, everything about it is just brilliant. And like I said, I've always loved it. It's artwork. It comes from a time when films were just epic. And this one is one of the epicest. Coming from a period of film noir more than 70 years later, a lot of people will say it was one of the greatest films ever made. And it is. Starring William Holden, who at the time was one of those people who had never really caught on, but he got this role playing Joe Gillis. And right from the beginning, you know how it ends. Norma Desmond, one of the iconic screen characters, was beautifully played by Gloria Swanson. Her butler, Max, played by Erich von Stroheim. The whole style of the film that was created by Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett in what was their final collaboration is just, well, I often say the word iconic is overused, but in this case, no, it is an iconic film. This book goes into the history of the making of the film and the people involved, how they came to be involved in making the film, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful book. I read it in early November. This is what I said about it. I have always enjoyed the film Sunset Boulevard since the first time I saw it many years ago. If you've never seen it, I heartily recommend it. It's about Hollywood, how it chews you up and spits you out, uses you for as long as you are useful, and about the frailty of humans. Stellar performances by all the cast members with a marvellous screenplay by Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder. It crosses genres, is part classic film noir, part horror movie, part story of unrequited love, and part nostalgia documentary. It is also a film that confuses reality and fantasy. Watching it, you almost swear it was a biopic, and that Norma Desmond was real, so marvellously is it crafted. This most excellent book tells the story behind the story, and is a must-read for any fan of the movies from the old days. If you're of a certain age, you'll know what I mean. If you know what I mean, you'll enjoy this book. Now, where did I put my Erich von Stroheim biography? And therein lies the tale. But yeah, this is a really, really lovely book to read. It's detailed, well-researched, tells the story behind the story. And there is a great story about the making of the film itself, as well as the film. So if you are a fan of the old days, the old movies, then this is definitely one you should read. Ready for my close-up for the making of Sunset Boulevard and the Dark Side of the Hollywood Dream by David M. Lubin. Having read I'm ready for my close-up, David Lubin's book, I was naturally going to go into Arthur Lenig's wonderful biography of Erich von Stroheim. Now, I've always been a fan of Erich von Stroheim. His movie Greed is, I would say, my all-time favourite movie, even in the version that we have today. But it's a magnificent movie. And a lot of people say that, he made Greed by just recreating the book page by page. Well, if you've ever read the book McTeague by Frank Norris, on which the movie Greed is based, you know that's a load of crap. I read Arthur Lenig's book on Bela Lugosi last year. I wanted to read this Stroheim book for a long, long time. So I bit the bullet and I bought myself a copy of it early in 2025. And I'm glad I did, because I thought, after reading Ready for My Close-Up, now is the time to read Stroheim. And as with Arthur Lenig's other book on Lugosi, this is very detailed, very well researched, and Lenig is a man who knows what he's talking about, having been involved in recreations and all sorts of detailed work to do with Stroheim's movies. It is I really enjoyed reading it in the same way that I enjoyed reading the Lugosi. It puts a lot of myths to bed and explains a lot of the. Like with Lugosi, Stroheim created his own publicity and created his own myth. This explains what was real and what was made up, and it goes into quite extensive detail about how he made the films and what was left out of the versions that we now have, as far as is possible. And it's just a wonderful read, and you get to really understand the man behind the image. In some ways, he was a strange man. Not always a nice man, but could be a very nice man. Like all people, it's easy to be judgmental, but everybody's flawed in some ways. But it's a great book to read. If it is of interest to you, I would heartily recommend it. A lot of the other books about Stroheim, they are like the book The Man You Love to Hate. They are kind of the same story, but they don't go into the detail and didn't quite do the research that Lenig did. So a lot of the writing about von Stroheim that is out there prior to Lenig's book was indeed inaccurate, because they went with the either von Stroheim's version or some of the other stories that were printed about him as fact. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I guess it's not for everyone, but if you are a fan of Erich von Stroheim, couldn't recommend it highly enough. Entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, Andrew Loney. This book is challenging in many ways. I am not a fan of the monarchy, I am not a fan of the royal family, I am even less a fan of Andrew. Out of all the children of Elizabeth, he is the most revolting, and they're all pretty bad, but he is just disgusting. And this is something that we thought we already knew. And we've known it for years. And then came his car crash interview with Emily Maitlis, and all the revelations with Epstein, and all the rest of it. And we thought we knew what a vile creature he was. And Fergie, she's always been quite a revolting creature. She's just the sort of person that you wouldn't want to get stuck in a lift with. And we thought we knew, how bad they were. And then I read this. I was inspired by it by seeing an interview with Andrew Loney on YouTube, and he was talking about the book, and I thought, I've got to read that. Even in spite of what you think you know about Andrew and Ferguson, they are so much worse than you can possibly imagine. They really are revolting, vile creatures. And this book it's a train wreck from beginning to end. And they are just so much worse than you imagine. I read this, and I was just completely gobsmacked by what I was reading. So what I wrote on November 11th was, just read it. Even given what you already know, which is a lot, there is so much more that you don't know. These two are worse than you can possibly imagine. We as taxpayers have funded it for decades. Just read it. Yeah, that's about it really. If you are a fan of the monarchy and the royal family, then no matter what Loney writes, it won't change your mind. But I would say that everybody should read this because you're paying for this lifestyle. You're paying for what these people do, and that's not right. This Way to the Revolution by Ian Francis with additional text by Edward Jackson, designed by Justin Hallstrom. Flat Pack Projects 2019. Now, I will grant you this is not a mainstream book. I discovered this book purely and simply because I was in Birmingham, and it is a book all about 1960s Birmingham. This Way to the Revolution. It sheds light on a load of untold stories about art, activism, survival in late 60s Birmingham, particularly in the Moseley, Balsall Heath area. And it talks about the birth of Black Sabbath, a Yoko Ono be-in at the Midlands Arts Centre, anti-racism march in the wake of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, 8-day occupation of the Great Hall at Birmingham University, biker bar in Digbeth Church, a psychedelic club above a furniture shop in Erdington, a bizarre Cilla Black film shot in Ladywood. The book is a lovely piece of work. It features over 100 images, among them many photographs by Janet Mendelsohn and Nick Hedges, which capture a specific moment in time when the city was changing, coming to terms with a decade of redevelopment and things being knocked down, slum clearance, and it's a wonderful book. One of the reviews, it says the book is a kind of archive in itself. It both reminded me of what Birmingham in 1968 felt like and told me about much that I did not know at the time. What a year it was. A multi-layered portrait of Birmingham during the sunny 60s, which is both breathtakingly wide and forensically detailed. An invaluable document of how cultural and political foment in 1968 played out in Britain's second city. You know, I wasn't in Birmingham in the 1960s. It told me a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And I've learned a lot of things I didn't know, particularly around about the Balsall Heath and Moseley area, which was a hotbed of political activism, surrealist artwork, music. It's a part of Birmingham, that South Birmingham area, Balsall Heath, Moseley, Kings Heath area. I absolutely adore that part of Birmingham. This book talks a lot about that area and also the other parts of Birmingham, the change that came in the 1960s, which uprooted people, like many cities across the UK in the late 60s. It was a time of upheaval. Large parts of cities were taken apart and new roads put in. Redevelopment, they called it. Big tower blocks went up. And it changed the face of the country forever. Now, 50, 60 years later, those same tower blocks that were put up are being taken down because it was a bit of social experimentation that just didn't work. The reasons it was done, like a lot of things, were for profit, not for anybody's welfare and best interests. So this is an interesting book, and I think it's an important book if you've got any interest in Birmingham. This Way to the Revolution by Ian Francis. Invaded, the Intentional Destruction of the American Immigration System by J.J. Correll. This is the first book written by J.J. Correll about his time as a Border Patrol agent on the border between the US and Mexico, around the San Diego area. There will be a review of his second book, Treason, which deals specifically with the events of the Biden administration. But this first book, Invaded, tells all about how it got to the point where treason starts. So what I wrote when I originally read this book before I started on the Goodreads thing, So what I've done is I've actually reread it, and I've created a review of it so that I can add it into this. What I wrote when I read it was Border Patrol Agent J.J. Carell's first book about the deliberate, calculated destruction of US sovereignty, borders, and the planned immigration strategy designed to change the demographic of the nation. The disastrous Biden administration's treasonous actions to destabilize the nation create anarchy, all to enrich the politicians and ruling elite at the expense of everyone else. Yeah, conspiracy theory territory, you think. Why would they do that? Don't be ridiculous. Well, they did do that, and this book explains how and why. JJ's second book, Treason, explains further, but this is where you need to start to understand why and how they planned and executed this self-destructive strategy, whilst gaslighting the nation that diversity and inclusivity is good for the country. Don't dismiss this without reading it, and then read Treason. Then talk to me. And that's what I wrote, having read this book again to refresh my memory. And although it's like 2 years since I originally read it, and then I read Treason about a year ago now, and going back and rereading this one first now, I've suddenly sort of realised how it has all come about. And this book goes into way back 1965, the Clinton administration as well, the Obama administration, what they did, and how the Biden administration sort of built on that. But you can also see what happened in America and the blueprint that was used for Europe as well, because this kind of thing has been happening in the UK. Your big question when you're reading these books is why? Why would they do this? And the simple answer, as far as I can see, is profit, money. The people who are doing this, they don't care about you and me. This is all for profit. It's to make money. It's as simple as that. They don't care what happens. They just want to make money. I think that's the only answer. Anyway, like I said, read the books. This one, Invaded, and this other one, Treason. Treason by J.J. Carell. Treason is the second book by J.J. Carell. So this book was originally published 19th of February 2025. I read it in June, and on June 26, 2025, what I said was, "Oh, that's just right-wing propaganda. You need to stop getting your news from Fox," someone said to me when I was relating some of the content. Cognitive dissonance is more alive and well in the 21st century than I can remember in my lifetime. This and JJ's first book, Invaded, form a very unpleasant reading assignment about how the US immigration policy, border security, and planned demographic reorganization has been planned and executed over recent decades. It's just easier to believe it's not true. That is what I wrote when I read this book, and that's kind of the thing about it. This book talks all about the Biden's administration's destruction of America's sovereignty, opening the borders, allowing and actively encouraging and facilitating the mass migration across the US borders to create many of the problems that are now infesting American sanctuary cities. The gang warfare, the massive expenses that cities are being faced with to house these immigrants in their millions. And even in the UK we're facing the same thing. It's not something particularly new, it's something that came up in the 1960s, and it's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Basically it is a method of destabilizing the economy and the infrastructure by overloading the welfare system, and that's what it was designed to do, and that's what's happening now. Of course, people would rather believe, oh, it's just not true, and you're being xenophobic, and by not welcoming these people. Look, these people who are flooding into the US and also into Europe. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because we're bombing the shit out of their countries. So they're coming here. Is it good for our countries? Oh, well, diversity and all that, inclusivity. All bollocks. All this diversity and inclusivity, it's just bullshit. In the UK and in the USA, these people are being given priority over the people who were born, raised in the UK and the USA. We are being treated as second-class citizens to these invaders. And that's what's happening. We are being invaded. To say that, diversity is good for a nation, no, it isn't. It just isn't. So all these people who say, oh no, it's just propaganda, it's just right-wing propaganda, it's left-wing propaganda, it's all propaganda. That's the problem. Read the book. Then talk to me about it. So that is the end of this first podcast of the books that I read in 2025. Hope you enjoyed it. The next one will be along soon.